Hey guys, we're back doing predictions for UFC Fight Night 118, Cerrone versus Till. If you haven't yet checked out my predictions for UFC 216, they'll be linked in the description along with my Twitter profile at MMA Breakdown 0. All right, let's do it. Starting off with the first prelim fight on the Fight Pass prelim portion of the card at women's bantamweight. Lena Landsberg versus Aspen Ladd. I like Aspen Ladd here. I think she's the more technical striker. Just has tighter combinations. Really tricky and capable on the ground as well. Has some submission wins on her record. But yeah, I think the difference is going to be made on the feet, where Lena Landsberg is aggressive, gritty. She can endure in a dogfight. Got to the second round against Cyborg, but I thought she lost that fight against Pudilova. Really struggled with the straighter punches, more technical striking of Pudilova, and really most of her success came against the cage. You know, grinding in the clinch, making it kind of a war of attrition. But technique-wise, I really think Ladd has the advantage here. But Ladd still seems a little green. Not a super hot prospect, not going out there and destroying people. But I like her to pick apart Landsberg on the feet. Not one I would look to bet on. Ladd's a newcomer, and it's hard to really be confident in newcomers, especially someone like Ladd, who, like I said, isn't really tearing through her competition, but haven't been too impressed with Landsberg, so taking Ladd by decision. All right, at featherweight, Felipe Arantes versus Josh Emmett. This is a bit of a tricky matchup. Arantes, if he's put on his back, he's super dangerous with submissions from there. And it's very possible that Emmett could put him on his back. He is a wrestler, was really pursuing the takedown against Scott Holtzman, went for a lot of big, showy takedowns and slams, and if he gets takedown happy against Arantes, he could very easily get submitted. Arantes, a lot of guys have started fights really strong against him, put him on his back, look to beat on him, and he ends up submitting them. But I think Emmett is the smarter fighter here. If he can employ that style he used against Desmond Green, even in a loss, or against John Tuck, where he's hanging out way on the outside and really looking to pick his moments to leap in and land some big overhands, then I think he can outstrike Arantes all day like that. Arantes, his striking is capable, but he doesn't really have much structure to it. It's kind of hard to really put a finger on what his striking style is. He's just kind of an average striker. So if Emmett can really play his outside sniping style like that, then I don't see Arantes being able to outstrike him, and I don't think he can close the distance to take him down. So I like Emmett here, predicated on him fighting smart, sticking to a game plan, but not one I'd really look to bet on, possibly in a parlay, but Arantes is very dangerous off of his back, and it certainly is possible that Emmett may take him down and get submitted, but I like Emmett here. I think he's got the much more effective striking game, so Emmett by decision. All right, at welterweight, Jim Wallhead versus Warlley Alves. My first really confident pick of the card. I think Warlley Alves just steamrolls him here, and I really don't see any other way but that. Wallhead, to me, doesn't look like a UFC level fighter. Was somewhat competitive against Justin Ayari, but his follow-up fight against Luan Chagas just got lit up from the beginning of that fight. Practically got knocked out, but Chagas submitted him instead. That's how the fight ended, but really got beat up on the feet. And Warlley Alves, I think, is not only a higher level fighter than Luan Chagas, but a much higher level athlete with a lot more power and a lot more lethality with his submissions. So I don't think Wallhead's chin is going to hold up, but I think Alves is probably going to win by submission. I see him just doing his classic jumping on the neck, pulling guard for guillotine, getting Wallhead out of there. I think it's just too old, too unathletic, and his chin can't hold up either. So I like Alves big here. If the odds aren't so crazily in the favor of Alves, then this is the one I would definitely look to bet on. All right, at featherweight, Artem Lobov versus Andre Fili. This is a really interesting matchup. I know everyone loves to shit on Lobov. I was on the Lobov hate train. I partook in the bashing of Lobov after coming over from TUF, having some kind of dismal performances, especially against Alex White. But I think the joke's over. I don't care what anyone says. That Cub Swanson fight, that was a competitive, tough fight for Swanson. I think Lobov really acquitted himself there, going 5 rounds and really making Swanson work and, dare I say, struggle to get the win. Yeah, he's really been developing his kickboxing game, really sitting down on his technique, picking his shots, incorporating leg kicks into his game. And Fili's just kind of this really loose striker, does well in a brawl, but against Calvin Kattar, taking on this kind of unknown debuting fighter who wasn't some surging hot prospect, but a veteran of the outside the UFC scene, and didn't do that well against him. Kind of got his technique exposed. So I think Lobov's really been making those improvements. He's going to have a better control of range and technical striking here. So yeah, I like Lobov. Fili, he's got power, super aggressive, can hit takedowns, but I think Lobov's just going to be a little too technical for him. So I like Lobov by a decision. Not looking to bet on this one as a single bet, but if the odds are right, especially if Lobov's the underdog, I would definitely consider putting this in a parlay where I would bet a really small amount. But yeah, I like Lobov by decision. At middleweight, Trevor Smith versus Ramazan Emeev, newcomer Dagestani fighter. And this is kind of a tough fight. Watching Emeev's footage, he's kind of a low output striker, but technical with his counter striking. Looks like he's got pop in his hands, and doesn't really use his wrestling a whole lot like many of the other Dagestani fighters who've come over to the UFC. I think the difference here is that Emeev is a better athlete, younger than Smith. He's 30. Smith is 36. And biggest reason here why I'm taking Emeev is that I don't see Smith, who is a very solid American wrestler. I just don't see his kind of style of wrestling working against a Dagestani fighter who probably, even though we haven't seen it in, or at least the fights I researched, even though I didn't see it in those fights, I've got to assume that he has some kind of Sambo background, has a capable grappling game. So I don't see Smith just dragging him down, horsing him around like he's done to a lot of other kind of journeyman fighters in the UFC. And Smith, while his striking is kind of effective and serviceable, it's kind of a basic boxing game that you would see out of a typical boxer wrestler, whereas Emeev's game, while he's not really high output, not very aggressive, I think it's definitely a more technical striker and a good counter striker. And also seems to have some submission ability. Submitted Michael Falco with a Darce choke. If Smith really pursues the takedown, leaves his head out there, I could see Emeev submitting him. So This is one I would possibly bet on. I don't think it's justified though if the odds are so much in Emeev's favor. But yeah, I think being the younger guy, being athletic, being a more technical striker, I think that's too much for Smith to deal with. And we've seen Smith, when he fights more technical strikers like Talis Leites, I think Kowalkiewicz knocked him out. And even in his couple fights ago against Andrew Sanchez, really struggles with the more cerebral, dynamic strikers. So I'm taking Emeev. I think he gets a finish either way, by submission or by TKO. Wouldn't bet everything on him, but might be one depending on the lines to take advantage of. All right, Damien Stasiak versus Brian Kelleher at Bantamweight. This is probably the toughest fight on the card for me to call. You have a guy in Stasiak who loses the fights that he looks best in and wins fights that he looks bad in. And Brian Kelleher only has 2 fights in the UFC. One, a really quick finish against a good fighter in Alcantara, but we really didn't get to see much of Kelleher's game. And then in his follow-up fight against Vera, we got to see a little bit more of his game, was doing fairly well, and ends up getting submitted. It's hard to pick Stasiak because he's not a super active fighter. He's a technical striker, but will leave himself open to getting hit a lot. And Kelleher is probably going to be the much more aggressive striker, really looking to land bombs and hunt for the knockout. Kelleher's probably also going to look to take it to the ground. He's, kind of a very hyper aggressive boxer wrestler. And Stasiak, he was put on his back a lot by Davey Grant and was losing that fight, but kept threatening with submissions and eventually hit an armbar that worked and submitted him, won the fight. So I don't know if Kelleher puts him on his back. I think he's kind of playing with fire there. But, Davey Grant, Philippe Piechota, those guys probably don't have the same level of wrestling as Brian Kelleher. And then on the feet, Stasiak probably a more technical striker, whereas Kelleher is more of a brawler. Man, I want to take Stasiak fighting in his home country, I guess. Poland. He is Polish, right? Yeah, fighting in his homeland. And looking pretty strong against Pedro Munoz. I was really surprised by that performance against Munoz. That was a fight where I thought he deserved to win. Looked a lot better than Munoz. Had a lot of success on the feet. It was probably his most offensively proactive performance in the UFC so far. But ended up losing the decision. You know what? I'm gonna go with Stasiak. I think he's more technical. I think Kelleher has this allure about him, because of his finish over Alcantara. But I don't know that we've really seen a complete game from him that tells us that he can really outwork guys for 3 rounds or even repeatedly have success just running over guys like he did to Alcantara. Stasiak is definitely a shaky fighter, and like I said, when he looks bad, he wins, and when he looks good, he loses. And not being a really active striker, I think, can definitely hurt him against Kelleher. But I think I'm going to take Stasiak. I think it's just a little more proven at this point, but definitely one I'm staying completely away from as far as betting goes. But this is the one pick that I might have to change later on. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with Stasiak. All right, at heavyweight, Dmitry Smoliakov versus Adam, whatever his last name is, Wieczorek. I think I'm going to take Wieczorek to win this fight. Debuting fighter Smoliakov has looked like garbage in the UFC, getting believe dropped by Luis Enrique and then submitted in the second round. And then Cyril Asker, a much smaller, much more out of shape fighter, not only destroying him with ground and pound, but first hitting a takedown on him and then just mounting him and pounding him out. Very kind of visually bizarre thing to see there. But yeah, Wieczorek, kind of a big, lumbering, oafish guy who kind of gets beat on early in fights by more athletic fighters who are kind of dangerous strikers, and then just kind of hangs around, outlasts the Storm, and he's able to dominate from there. His one fight against Cisse, I can't remember the guy's name, an African fighter, I believe. That's exactly how the fight went. In another fight, he just kind of steamrolled the guy, was so big, able to get him down early and submit him. Smoliakov, if someone like Cyril Asker's hitting a blast double on him and then pounding him out, I think a guy who is as big as Wieczorek and is capable on the ground could easily take him down and smother him. But, Wieczorek could be punched out. Smoliakov has much more of that classic heavyweight bruiser build. So, I don't know. Not one I'm looking to bet on. Just kind of a fight I don't really care about. But yeah, haven't been impressed with Smoliakov. 2 losses by finish. I'm going to go with Adam Wieczorek. All right, lightweight, Teemu Packalen versus Marcin Held. This is a fight I'm betting big on. I'm going with Marcin Held. Teemu Packalen, one of the least skilled fighters in the UFC, let alone his division. Just got destroyed by Mark Giacchese. Had a nice knockdown and then submission over Thibault Guti. But if you go back to his debut fight against Mikel Lebu, which was only 2 years ago, and hasn't been in the cage enough, I think, to have done a whole lot of developing since then. That fight with Mikel Lebu, very amateurish, the skill level he showed in that fight. Especially some exchanges on the ground, very unrefined, very green, very unskilled for the UFC level. And Marcin Held is pretty much a masterclass grappler, as he was showing off in his last fight against Damir Hadzovic and lost by a last-minute Hail Mary KO, knee KO. And the guy, has trouble being dominant, even against guys like Lozon and Diego Sanchez, but he's still very skilled. Even on the feet, he's skilled. He was outstriking Diego Sanchez. So I just see a huge technical discrepancy here. I think Packalen's completely outmatched. He's going to get outclassed. I guess with a guy like Held, who's as shaky as he is, always capable of giving the fight away, like against Hadzovic, and just kind of not having the cardio to hang with Sanchez. A guy who's going to be as aggressive as Packalen because of how unskilled he is, stands a chance of landing a bomb, putting him out, but I think Held should really outclass him, especially on the ground. So I like Held, and I'll be looking to place a good-sized bet on him. All right, a middleweight, Jonathan Wilson. We're onto the main card now, also on Fight Pass. Jonathan Wilson versus Oscar Piechota. This is one I'm totally staying away from. Oscar Piechota, tall, rangy, but very patient and low output kickboxer. I could see that possibly working against a guy who is very prone to punching himself out like Wilson. and very aggressive, coming forward, looking for the knockout. Piechota could time him, but I see Wilson being the better athlete here. And I think his athleticism, his volume and aggression, and coming forward, his determination to come forward will just kind of overwhelm Piechota. Piechota also has some submission wins off of his back, or he's put on the ground. He has seems to have a decent triangle, but honestly, his level of competition, though I don't really know the guys he's fought, just in watching his fights, it seems that his level of competition has been weak. So yeah, I'm going with Jonathan Wilson, but definitely staying away from this one. Betting wise, Jonathan Wilson, coming off of 2 losses against Jan Cutelaba and Enrique De Silva. Kind of a guy who's just all athleticism. If he can't get the finish, will get beaten. So I think it's definitely possible he loses to a pretty technical, sharp striker like Piechota, but I will take Wilson. All right, light heavyweight, Jan Blachowicz versus Devin Clark. I think it's very clear Blachowicz cannot fight in the clinch, and he cannot deal with wrestlers. Devin Clark should be able to do both of those things very well, very effectively. Clark's still a bit of a green overall fighter, but I think he's improving, putting his game together. And on the feet, seems to be developing technically pretty well. Not just an athletic guy like Wilson, just going out there looking to bang. Does have finesse on the feet. But yeah, biggest thing is the wrestling. An athletic fighter like Clark, who's got strong wrestling, I think he's going to be able to follow to a T the game plan that Corey Anderson employed against Blachowicz, even Jimmy Manawa, who just kind of walked him down and out-clinched him enough to neutralize him, get the win. Blachowicz, still a dangerous striker, but I mean, this guy couldn't put away Cummins. Had a guy who he had as big an advantage against as Cummins and couldn't put him away. Other than that, Ilir Latifi body kick TKO just hasn't been showing up. So I think Clark's going to out-wrestle him here. This is one I might look to place a small bet on. So I like Clark. Women's strawweight, Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Jodi Esquibel. Complete mismatch to me. Esquibel has only fought, I think, once a year for the last... only fought once in 2015, once in 2014. I guess had the one fight in 2016, her elimination fight on Tough. And before 2014, only fought once in 2011. So hasn't been an active fighter. Her fight against Ashley Yoder on Tough, maybe she deserved to win it, but it wasn't impressive. And Kowalkiewicz, we saw she gave... she went down very easily to Claudia Gadelha, but against Jędrzejczyk, gave her maybe her toughest fight yet, dropped her at one point. So I just think it's a huge mismatch, experience-wise, skill-wise, just everything. But, I thought the same thing kind of, not the same kind of mismatch, but I thought Claudia Gadelha against Jessica Andrade, I thought Gadelha was clearly, just the higher-level fighter, and ended up just getting completely beaten down in that fight. And Kowalkiewicz coming off of a really one-sided loss to Gadelha after the title fight, she may be not in a good state of mind. I think that's possible, but Esquibel I don't think is a skilled enough wrestler, a dominant enough fighter to really make Kowalkiewicz pay for that. And Kowalkiewicz, when she fought some of the lower level fighters like Heather Jo Clark and Randa Marcos, won those fights but didn't put them away. So if she's, kind of hesitant, gun shy now, and Jodi Esquibel, she seems to be a pretty come forward fighter and looks for takedowns, looks to close the distance and hit shots in the pocket. I guess it's possible she gets a win, but I just still see Kowalkiewicz being way too technical. This is a much higher level fighter, especially on the feet. So, and Esquibel, if you look at her fight with Alexa Grasso, really got picked apart and her face got rearranged in that fight against a technical striker who controlled distance. So that's what I expect from Kowalkiewicz. Just kind of want to throw that out there that after 2 losses, especially one really devastating, it may be a factor, her headspace in this fight, but I still like Kowalkiewicz pretty big, and I think it's still worth taking a risk on as far as betting goes. All right, then the main event at welterweight, Donald Cerrone versus Darren Till. There is a line out for this right now, and Cerrone is the favorite. Let's see here. Cerrone on 5 dimes at least. Cerrone is minus 185. Darren Till plus 160. And I've got to say, I haven't jumped on that yet, but after thinking through this fight, that's just the house clock. After thinking through this fight, I really need to jump on that line. I think Darren Till, for one thing, Darren Till's just got youth on his side here, right? Cerrone's 34 and Till is, 24? And Cerrone, is just looked like he's lost several steps for a while now. Still very competitive against Lawler, and I actually thought he won that fight, but it's not the guys like Lawler, the guys who just come out looking to outbrawl Cerrone, who beat him. They do give him very tough fights. Robbie Lawler, Matt Brown, and even Nate Diaz back in the day. These guys who just come out looking to scrap and come forward, trade punches with him. But it's the really dynamic guys who just tear through Cerrone. Like Anthony Pettis. I would say Jorge Masvidal is definitely more on that dynamic, crafty side than just kind of a reckless brawler. And Till just is going to have that... he just has that style so much more so than a guy like Lawler, where he's just going to be really crafty, really dynamic, very sneaky with shots. And Cerrone, he's got the experience advantage, has the overall skill advantage, but being at his advanced age, having taken a ton of damage in the last couple of years, I don't think his body can hold up anymore. I think Till will put him away. Cerrone's still very dangerous. In a range striking fight, Cerrone would win that, I think, comfortably. And Cerrone's also a very underrated ground fighter. Hit a takedown on Lawler in their fight and has a lot of submission wins on his record. Overall, a very, very skilled fighter. I think an underrated, ground fighter is underrated in terms of his overall MMA game. But, I just see the age really working against Cerrone here. I think he's really kind of shop-worn at this point, and Till being as dynamic as he is, he's really going to find those openings, I think, and hurt Cerrone, possibly finish him. I know Till, didn't finish the last guy he fought, Blachowicz. But, Cerrone's up there in age, and I just don't think he can move the same way he used to. Even the Rafael dos Anjos fight, a guy who could mix up his striking, go to the body, totally ran over Cerrone. And Cerrone's looked great since coming over to welterweight, but, the losses to Jorge Masvidal, even taking a ton of hard shots against Lawler in his last fight, I think the writing's just kind of on the wall there. If you can be crafty, dynamic, really set up your shots against Cerrone, you're kind of going to pick him apart and run over him. So I like Till. I've really got to jump on that plus 160 line because I have a feeling other people are really going to recognize his advantage in this fight and really jump on it. So I have to place my bet on Till, but that's one. I wouldn't bet the house. Cerrone, like I said, very skilled fighter. Till, doesn't have the experience, the resume of Cerrone, but I feel pretty comfortable about him winning this fight. All right, so those are my predictions, and now let's just recap the bets that I'm going to be making. So, biggest single bets. I like Till over Cerrone. I like Held over Packalen. I like Alves over Wallhead. Those may be my three. And then also possibly Kowalkiewicz over Esquibel. I would not put that one as one of my top three just because of Kowalkiewicz coming off of 2 losses. And then Devin Clark against Jan Blachowicz. Also, not in the top 3, but that's another one, depending on the lines, I would possibly take a look at. But then for a parlay, and if you guys, I've already spoken about this, but my strategy going forward is going to be to bet big on the single fights where I feel it's very clear that one fighter is going to win, and then just look to take a chance on a parlay, maybe a 5-6 fighter parlay, just putting a really minimal amount of money on, hoping they'll work out, but not looking to make the parlays my main strategy of making money. So for a parlay, I would throw those 3 in there. Devin Clark as well, possibly Kowalkiewicz. I would leave that one out, I think, maybe just as a bit of a safety net in case something crazy happens, like the Gadelha-Andrade fight. I really thought Gadelha was going to win, but those 3, then Devin Clark, I would definitely include. Ramazan Emeev, I think, would be safe. And then Artem Lobov, or maybe Aspen Ladd. But I wouldn't look to go more than 5 or 6 fighters for a parlay at that point. Even if you're just risking a minimal amount of money, there's just kind of a high chance it won't work out. So, I think I might throw Aspen Ladd in there. I think I might go Till, Held, Alves, Ladd, Clark, and Emeev. I think that would be my parlay. Lobov and Emmett, but those are kind of trickier matchups, I think. So yeah, that would be my parlay. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Again, check out my predictions for UFC 216 if you haven't done so already, and then I'll be back with predictions for Fight Night Machida versus Brunson. And follow me on Twitter at MMA Breakdown 0. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Bye.